Out on the northwest frontier, Xinjiang is China's largest region, home to 25 million people there. Many different ethnic groups, a vast area of deserts, mountains, and natural resources. And after the period of terrorist attacks between the 1980s and 2016, violence is now largely contained. And Xinjiang's economy is growing. 65 years have passed since the founding of the autonomous region. So what is life like there? How did Xinjiang fight terrorism, and what can it do to ensure an even more stable and more prosperous future? To talk about these issues, I'm joined in the studio by Professor Li Jinzhao from the Beijing Foreign Studies University and Professor John Gong from the University of International Business and Economics, and via satellite by Zoom, Ahmed Khan, Research Fellow at the Belt and Road Strategy Institute at Tsinghua University, and Cui Huiyao, a reporter currently in Xinjiang, and also by telephone we'll be joined by Anarguli Awuti, an English teacher at Hainan Foreign Language School affiliated to Beijing Foreign Studies University. That is our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. So let me start with you, Huiyao. As Xinjiang celebrates its 65th anniversary of becoming an autonomous region here in China, what is it like there?
Well, Zhou Yue, I gotta say, compared to a few years back, the biggest difference now is this place is finally safe. As you said, thousands of terrorist attacks have hit the region since the 1990s, and now there have been 0 attacks whatsoever for the past 3 years and 9 months. And because the region is much safer now, people are focusing more on the economic activities. Over the last 5 years, Xinjiang's GDP has grown by an average of 7% every year, and the average income grew by 9% every year. And one thing I noticed is that tourists are back. They can finally enjoy the natural beauty of this place without having to worry about their safety. And the influx of tourism is in turn raising the income of locals, and it is driving growth in the tertiary sector. And let's not forget, Xinjiang's geographical location means it is a vital gateway in the Belt and Road Initiative, linking China with Central Asia, Europe, and beyond. And a safe environment is a precondition for all those projects to be carried out smoothly. So overall, Zhou Yue, security has made a huge difference to Xinjiang. It is bringing back tourists, jobs, and a normal life that is free from danger.
You talk about the lives of the local people. How they're making a living, how they're educated, and how do they worship. Is there any changes over the past 65 years?
Yes, definitely. Certain aspects of life have changed. For instance, I spoke to some ethnic Kyrgyz living in Ili Kazakh Autonomous Prefecture. They used to herd in the mountains, making about 5,000 yuan a year, $730 US, and now they are making 5,000 a month, and they've moved into apartments and started running guest houses and making a fortune. And for women in Shufu County near Kashgar, they've gained more personal freedoms. You know, in the past, some were not even allowed to wear makeup, but today that's changed. And the lady I talked to even owned a hair salon. And for the Tajiks who live high on the Pamir Plateau, their children no longer suffer from a lack of nutrition at high altitude. They study in boarding schools in Kashgar, a much better learning environment, and they're now growing healthy and strong. However, that being said, some parts of their life have not changed. For instance, traditions and religious belief. People can still practice religion under the law, and in Xinjiang there are over 24,000 mosques. That's one for every 530 Muslims. And the ethnic language, it is also being protected. For instance, I visited several kindergartens. They teach local children in both Mandarin and Uyghur. So this is Xinjiang, where people's lives are definitely moving forward compared to decades ago, but certain aspects of their culture and tradition are protected as well. So yeah.
But obviously not without problems. For example, the threats from terrorists. The controversial vocational education and training centers, some Western media saying they serve as forced labor camps, detention centers. I know that you've been visiting some of those vocational training centers. What have you seen, and what can you tell us?
Yes, I visited one center in Kashgar myself, so I can tell you from my experience. Well, what I saw was it was just like any of those vocational schools you've been to where students study language, in this case Mandarin, and learn vocational skills and of course laws. Now a lot of the attendees were not very well educated, some even lived in poverty, and as religious extremism was spreading in their towns and villages, these people could have easily derailed and become terrorists if without proper guidance. So the idea is by separating themselves and not learning a craft or ability to work, in essence you're creating an class that will literally become terrorists or extremists if they are already leaning in that direction. So what this center does essentially is to take precautions as early as possible and prevent terrorist attacks from happening in the first place. And the facts speak for itself that over the past 3 years and 9 months there have been 0 attacks. So yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Huiyao, for your reporting from Xinjiang. I know that Professor Li, you actually grew up in Xinjiang.
I am definitely deeply rooted in Xinjiang. I'm Han by ethnicity, and my parents were the first generation to Xinjiang, and I was born in Xinjiang, and I'm the second generation. And I can tell that from the late 1960s and early 1970s to now, Xinjiang definitely witnessed a sea change in terms of social conditions, economic achievements, and the political stability, and the cultural diversity. And my parent generation, they in the mid-1960s, they went to the at that time called 生产建设兵团. Production and the construction corps. So I was born into this administrative system, and this system is very encompassing. It has its own colleges, universities, its own agribusiness, its own, at that time it was called the modern agriculture, meaning large-scale farming.
Is that system working for the local people? Because obviously people in the West worry this is an immigration from the Han Chinese, they want to change or synthesize the local population and their culture. What do you say?
Well, Xinjiang is really a vast region. The region is so vast that it is bigger than several provinces combined in eastern part of China. So I think the construction corps played a very significant role in developing local industry and agriculture. So it's very different from like military bases moved to Xinjiang, because those at the original soldiers in the 1950s, they became civilians overnight. They collectively became civilians, and they decided to station there, and they were self-sufficient. They didn't depend on the local people to give them food and clothing and build houses for them, so they were all self-reliant, self-sufficient.
But how did the local people think of them, and what is the interaction like?
I think at my time, the local people were not really much aware of the construction corps, because the construction corps built cities from scratch. They didn't invade the established settlements of settlers. They went to some parts of the deserts along some seasonal rivers, and then they built irrigation. For instance, my city, Shihezi, every tree was planted. And all the buildings were built by bare hands.
By those soldiers.
By soldiers who turned civilians overnight. Actually, at that time, they were complaining because by joining the army, they did not want to go back to be farmers again. So they had to be persuaded that, okay, it's very important to stay in this border region and to make this region more prosperous, more inhabitable, and to help the country to have more arable land.
Okay.
So they are very proud of themselves.
That's probably Xinjiang of the past, but I know that you've also been teaching in Xinjiang. One of your students, Anna Guli, is now teaching in Hainan. Let's talk to her. So Anna Guli, I know that you got your education and traveled all over China to teach. What is your Xinjiang story?
Yeah, like I come from Xinjiang, and I finished my junior high school in Urumqi, and there is a policy like called ban. I think like some of us know it, and after graduation, I went to Jiangsu province to like finish my senior high school. And both like we can go to like eastern part of China to finish our senior high school because there is a policy called ban. With the policies like ban and ban, we can go to some better cities to finish our schools, and this is a great chance for us. And like as for like, I think nowadays people's attitude to education changed a lot in Xinjiang because I have an elder sister and elder brother, and they are just 2 years older than me, but they did not even go to like senior high school. They just finished the junior high school and get married and like that. So nowadays the things are different. All the parents, almost all the parents, will send their children to college. And
so you're saying education is important even for Uyghurs because it will give them a better chance as a better life?
Yes, yes, it is important.
And the recent work meeting by the central authorities have basically highlighted the importance of that. John, last Friday's work conference on Xinjiang, and the Chinese president said all the policies of the Chinese authorities has proved to be a success because of the better lives qualities of the Uyghurs, people and other ethnic groups. For example, the annual economic growth is 7%, the income growth is 9%, and there were more than 2.9 million residents employed in Xinjiang and out of poverty. So it basically is saying that the Xinjiang policy is working in Xinjiang.
Well, out of all the measures we've been talking about, I think the most important thing is what Cui has said, safety. I think this is the most important thing. It's the fundamental feature of a society of law and order. Without that, there will be no economic development. There will be no anything. So I think it's, the fact that there's no terrorism, there are no attacks, people are free to travel, the travelers are coming, tourists are coming back. All of these things testify to the fact that the policies towards Xinjiang has been effective so far. Let alone, the economic policies. We've been talking about 7% economic growth rate. That's much higher than the rest part of the China. And income-wise, it's even higher. It's close to 10%. I mean, that's a tall order achievement.
And June, I know that you are from Pakistan, and there are Uyghurs also working and living in Pakistan. But also, you face the security issue in Pakistan. So what is your understanding of the problems in Xinjiang and the way they approach the problem?
Mrs. Uygur, this is a topic that is very close to me personally. We know that in the region, a lot of countries have suffered. In the past 20 years, there are many wars that have been waged and some that were claimed to be wars for peace. And the consequence of that is more instability. And the problem is that instability breeds instability. We know that now China's proposed solution in general for the BRI and also for Xinjiang has been to address the root causes of terrorism, separatism and extremism. And what are the root causes? People anywhere in the world, what they want is a good life, stability, a good future. And if economic opportunities and the right opportunities are provided to young people who are at the crux of being disenchanted and feeling that they're attracted to some ideologies that are not conducive, then we can actually solve the problem. And I was listening to what other panelists have been talking about, how there is growth, economic growth, how people have a more positive outlook. And actually, what people must understand is that the alternative is right across the borders. The alternative is countries in Afghanistan, for example, Syria, Libya. There's so many countries that have not been able to address the root causes. And without that, what we see is serious, devastating consequences.
All right, we'll take a short break and we'll be coming back to talk about Xinjiang on the 65th anniversary of the autonomous region. But there is the issue of ethnic unity. Of course, there are Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other ethnic groups, as well as the Han Chinese. What is your sense of the ethnic relationship between them? Is there problems? What should be the main challenge?
I think in general, in the more developed regions in China, in Xinjiang, in more developed cities and developed regions, you see much better harmony among different ethnic groups. But in more remote regions where livelihood sometimes remains a problem, we tend to see more resentment. So
is it economic inequality,
yes,
or
economic
education?
Inequality.
Okay,
And for some time, Xinjiang's natural resources, for instance, natural gas, oil, and others are being imported, being transferred to the eastern part of China. So Xinjiang became this source of natural resources. But now, as more investment is being made in Xinjiang, as the Belt and Road Initiative is emphasizing more the regional development in Xinjiang, I think we would see more harmony and more economic prosperity in the former remote regions.
Okay.
So we need to see this uneven development that indeed exists in Xinjiang.
And Arnold Guli, do you agree, because better economic opportunities and education will probably make the ethnic tensions probably less? You've been traveling elsewhere in China. Do you think ethnic unity is a problem in Xinjiang, and how should we look at it?
Yeah, actually, I am totally agree with Professor Jin Zhao, and I lived in Xinjiang for almost 20 years, and I am from a small village. And I think in Xinjiang, we treat each other just as a family. And in Xinjiang, I can't realize the ethnic difference here. And when I was other cities in China, then I realized that, I am Uyghur, like that. So in Xinjiang, in that place, I can't realize that I am a different like this.
And then, what is your thinking about the ethnic relationship? Of course, the Han Chinese have been immigrating to Xinjiang, and they've been trying to work and also lift the local people out of poverty, but there are also tensions.
Yeah, with the development of economy, the tensions will be more less tensions here, because if economy develops well, the Uyghur people can also live a good life. They don't have any excuse for saying anything like that. So I think with the development of the economy, the tension will be less and less.
John, of course, the Chinese central authorities have been trying to modernize the less developed areas, including Xinjiang and Tibet. But the accusations from the West is always that they want to try to wipe out the ethnic identity, their local cultures. What do you think it is happening?
Well, first of all, this is certainly a false accusation. I think the kind of what you mean by disharmony and tension between the Uyghur people, the minorities, and Han Chinese is not the same kind of sort of racially based discrimination as we see in the United States, for example. We ethnic people don't hold a discriminatory view of Uyghur people, minorities there, right? And neither do these people against us. And I think this kind of a tension is mostly arising from economic interests. This is a country that's dominated with a larger population of ethnic Han people, right? That's just a fact we have to admit. And we speak Mandarin Chinese. Most of the business are conducted in Mandarin Chinese. So for an ethnic minority who is aspiring to get into sort of mainstream business, you have to speak ethnic Chinese. You have to speak Mandarin Chinese. You have to get an education. that you know, the mainstream education has to be ethnic Mandarin Chinese. Of course, doesn't mean that you can't, you know, you still have to study Uyghur language, for example, right? I mean, you still have to preserve your own cultural heritage.
But
your own
realistically, the Uyghur languages and the Uyghur culture is going to be crowded out because modernization always drive out those minority cultures.
Well, it doesn't have to be. I think you know, we certainly don't have the intention of crowding out that language, right? I think people are entitled to study that. But you know, at the end of the day, it's a reality that you have to study Mandarin Chinese in order to be able to thrive economic-wise. You know, this is a given, I think, right? So I think it's a problem that can be solvable. It's not like inherently difficult to reconcile. And, you know, the bottom line is that people are not discriminated against each other. It's mostly driven by competing for economic interests, and that's an issue that economic development can resolve.
And June, I want your thoughts. How can the Uyghur and other ethnic groups keep their own identities and culture and also integrate it with the mainstream culture? Of course, here in China is the Han culture.
Mrs. Oya, I think this is an issue that many countries face. For example, in my own country, we have many provinces which have their own languages as well. And the idea is to preserve these languages, but also to ensure that people in marginalized parts of the country can assimilate in the main culture. So one thing that China is doing very effectively is that investing a lot in the culture, investing a lot in people studying these languages and understanding the old literature, etc., of these languages. And I think that can be one way to ensure that the richness of the languages and the unique cultures of the different nationalities is not only preserved but also cherished and celebrated. But definitely, I also agree with Professor's comment earlier that it is important for people to have the skill set to be able to contribute to the national growth, to be able to compete on a national level. And if China is willing to not only invest in this, but actually encourage people from marginalized areas or from families that don't have these opportunities to begin with, then I think it's a big favor, because many countries do not have the resources to incorporate and to include such factions in their societies.
And then controversy happens. Education and training can be interpreted as brainwashing or other coercive methods to change their mindset of the local people. Ms. Lee, you've been living in that part of the world, and how do you look at this?
Actually, based on my personal interaction with ethnic minority students in Xinjiang, for instance, I'm teaching at Beijing Foreign Studies University. I also have students from Tibet, from Xinjiang, and from some other remote regions. A lot of the students, they are very intelligent and they are very creative in not being just bilingual but being trilingual, and they are also very creative in not just mastering the language but mastering disciplines and specific expertise. And also my parents were also teachers in Xinjiang at colleges, and they also had a lot of ethnic minority students, and they were very eager to learn. They were very enthusiastic to learn. So I really agree with Professor Gong. Just like when we are modernizing China, it does not mean our Chinese tradition is being crowded out. Actually, we're witnessing a renaissance of Chinese traditional culture and practices. So I think the same can be reached. We can have a win-win of both economic development and the cultural renaissance in Xinjiang.
Yeah.
I think people advocating that kind of opinion is ill-intentioned. You know, this is a modern society. We have to move on. Here in China, if we don't study English, for example, if we don't do research in modern science and other areas, we'll be trapped in poverty forever. And for these people, you know, they have a choice. They can study, for example, just the script, for example, just their local language. I mean, this is a kind of a life, you know, the previous lady was referring to. It's a lifestyle like in Afghanistan. I mean, that's the kind of thing they want to choose. But on the other hand,
there's
like,
a question of discipline involved, because in those vocational training centers, they must be disciplined. Some sometimes their freedoms are restricted because of the school rules and regulations, and it has been interpreted as coercive measures in the West.
Well, this is unfortunate, I think. It's an unfortunate way that we're really constrained by the choices here. And let's keep in mind the bigger picture here, not sort of entangling with these details. This is a makeshift thing. It's a temporary thing. We're not going to incarcerate these people forever. And they're just coming here to get the skills, study the language, and start a new life. And we're not going to put them in jail, actually, right? I mean, they're going to be going back to society and make a living there. So I think we should judge the end results by the end results, as opposed to the steps and measures being implemented in the interim. So again, I want to say that for people in the minorities in China, they need to study science, they need to study math, they need to study Mandarin Chinese. This is the only way out to a successful life here in this society in China.
Zun, I also want your take. Those vocational training centers are perceived differently. Here in China is called an opportunity for economic empowerment, but in the West is deprivation of their rights. What is your thoughts?
Well, I was actually thinking that the audience for this kind of a narrative is also very clear. It's obvious that just like studying math, studying Mandarin can result in opportunities that are essential for the uplift of the community. And I think the real question is that why is this narrative being projected? Who is the audience? And it is very important for people who are buying these comments to understand that actually Islam and Muslims have a profound and beautiful history in China. It's not just the Silk Road, it's not just the fact that the Islamic civilization and Chinese civilization have coexisted and thrived together, but even today Muslims from all over the world are freely practicing their religion. And another contrast actually from the previous discussion I want to make is that, when people from developing countries would get a green card to go to the US, or they would move to Europe, any European countries, actually, it was compulsory for them to understand the local language so that they have opportunities in that country, in their new environment. So this is something not unique to China. It's not something unique to Xinjiang. It's something that has been done for the welfare of communities worldwide for centuries.
I want to pin you down on this because there's another dimension for Xinjiang. It is a gateway to Central Asia and also South Asia, and is a part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So Xinjiang's development is important for the rest of the world in this sense. Zun?
Indeed. Indeed. And I think that's why, an idea such as the Shanghai spirit gains a lot of momentum, because this region, we prosper and perish together, to be honest. Stability in Xinjiang is vital for the connectivity to the west of China. Stability in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Central Asia is vital as well. So, of course, the fact that China is investing in this idea, the fact that China is helping countries in the region as well overcome these challenges, means that we are connected and we share the same values and we share the same geography. We benefit when our neighboring regions are better off, stable and prospering economically. And another thing that I would also like to mention is that, for example, the SCO mandate is not just to address terrorism, extremism and separatism by targeting these outfits, but actually to increase the understanding, to increase the cultural, economic connectivity, to increase empathy among people within the region. And this is a lasting way forward. And I think the stability in Xinjiang can be a useful roadmap for countries that continue to fight these three evils as we speak.
Thank you very much. On that note, we have to wrap up. Thank you, Zun. Thank you, Anarguli. Thank you, John. And thank you, Professor Li. And you've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Zhu in Beijing. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.